I'm trying to find out is what's the guy's name on first base?
Oh, no. What is on second base?
I'm not asking you who's on second.
Who's on first?
That's what I'm trying to find out.
The question mark serves the purpose of identifying a sentence as an interrogative statement, or more simply, a statement that asks a question. The question mark plays a role in communication visually and orally. The inclusion of the question mark is a visual clue to the reader that the statement in which it is used is a question. When reading orally, the question mark directs the reader to end the sentence in a higher pitch to signify that a question has been asked. But from where does the question mark originate? If one is familiar with the Austin Powers films, one might have heard a not-so-credible theory about the origin of the question mark. During a group therapy session, Dr. Evil tells the group about his father.
My father would womanize, he would drink, he would make outrageous claims like he invented the question mark.
Fictional theories aside, there are two primary theories circulating, both of which suggest that the question mark developed sometime during the 7th or 8th centuries. One theory is that an early representation of the question mark was used by Alcuin of York, a poet and scholar from what would become England. Alcuin, who lived during the 7th century, used a mark called the punctus interrogativus to denote a question. This mark, a variation of the dots that we now refer to as periods, looked like a horizontal lightning flash emanating from the dot at the end of the sentence. Another frequently suggested theory, and perhaps more likely, is that the question mark dates back to the Latin word quaestio, which means question. During the Middle Ages, in order to save space on a written manuscript, quaestio was abbreviated to the first and last letters of the word. An uppercase Q was written above the lowercase o at the end of an interrogative sentence. This served to mark the sentence as a question and avoid the confusion that would result if the two letters had been placed horizontally. Looking at the image of a cursive Q written on top of the lowercase o, one can see how closely the notation resembles the question mark of today. As the question mark became more standard in the English language, confusion still existed about how to properly use it. In the 17th century, people were unsure if they should use the question mark for only direct questions or for both direct and indirect question. An indirect question is a question in which a question is described rather than directly stated. Eventually, during the 18th century, it became standard practice to use the question mark only for direct questions.
Well, I was just curious why you didn't use an exclamation point.
What are you talking about?
Well, see right here? You wrote Myra had the baby, but you didn't use an exclamation point.
So?
So, it's nothing. Forget it. I just found it curious.
Wait, what's so curious about it?
Well, I mean, if one of your close friends had a baby, and I left you a message about it, I would use an exclamation point.
Well, maybe I don't use my exclamation points as haphazardly as you do.
You don't think that someone having a baby warrants an exclamation point?
Hey, look, I just jotted down the message. I didn't know that I was required to capture the mood of each caller.
The exclamation point is used to convey a sense of excitement, strong emotion, or high volume, and is generally used after an interjection or exclamation. As with the question mark, the exclamation point is frequently found at the end of the sentence, although this is not always the case. Just as with the question mark, the likely origins of the exclamation point date back to Latin. The Latin word for joy is io. One theory is that just like the question mark, scribes wrote the capital I above the lowercase o to convey the tone suggested by the modern exclamation point. Looking at the modern exclamation point next to the construction of the Latin word eo with the I above the o, one can clearly see the close similarity. In the English language, the exclamation point was first introduced into printing in the 15th century. Up until the middle of the 17th century, the exclamation point was referred to as the note of admiration. In the German language, the exclamation point first appeared in the Luther Bible in 1797. Although the exclamation point remains strong in usage today, not everyone loves it. It is one of those punctuation marks that people often overuse. One of the great American authors, F. Scott Fitzgerald, once said, "Cut out all those exclamation marks. An exclamation mark is like laughing at your own jokes." On a final note, the exclamation point and question mark briefly became a bit closer. In 1962, Martin K. Spector, the head of an advertising agency in the United States, invented the interrobang. The interrobang fused the question mark and the exclamation point into a single punctuation. Spector's reasoning for doing so was that he felt advertisements that contained surprised, rhetorical questions would look better if a single punctuation mark was used, rather than a question mark followed by an exclamation point. While somewhat popular throughout the 60s, the interrobang quickly faded in popularity and never achieved standardized use.